I reminded my friend of everything she put him through, how broken he felt, how long it took to heal. He listened, he moved on, but now it's me in his place. And suddenly, I can't take my own advice.
Have you ever noticed how easy it is to give sound advice to a friend but struggle to follow that same advice when facing your own difficulties? It's a strange but universal experience. Can you think of a time when you gave great advice but didn't take it yourself? We seem to have clarity and a know-it-all attitude when analyzing someone else's problems, yet when it comes to our own, our emotions and biases cloud our judgment. The 17th century French writer and philosopher François de la Rochefoucauld once remarked, "We all have strength enough to endure the misfortunes of others." His keen observation highlights a fascinating truth about human nature. We handle other people's problems better than our own. Let's explore why this happens and how we can use this awareness to improve our own decision-making. We can be so quick to spot the flaws in a friend's choices, yet when we're in the same position, the answers aren't as clear. Suddenly it's complicated. That's because when we look at someone else's problems, we're seeing them from the outside, without the emotions, fears, or biases that cloud our own judgment. With that distance, everything seems clearer, and solutions feel obvious. But when is it our problem? We're stuck overthinking, second-guessing, and letting emotions take over. For example, if a friend is struggling with a toxic relationship, we can easily point out the red flags and suggest they walk away. Yet, if we find ourselves in a similar situation, the emotional attachment, history, and hope for change make it much harder to accept the same advice. When we deal with our own problems, emotions such as fear, self-doubt, guilt, or pain that pierces deep into our hearts often take center stage, leaving echoes that linger long after the moment is past. These emotions make it difficult to view our situations objectively. Self-preservation instincts may lead us to rationalize poor decisions or avoid uncomfortable truths. Meanwhile, cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias, cause us to focus on information that supports our current choices rather than considering alternative solutions. François de la Rochefoucauld suggested that our self-love blinds us, making it harder to see our own faults and mistakes. We instinctively protect our self-image, which can prevent us from acknowledging where we might be wrong or making necessary changes in our lives. When offering advice to others, we do so without bearing the consequences of their decisions. This gives us the freedom to think more rationally and take a detached, strategic approach. However, when we face our own problems, we are directly responsible for the outcome. The fear of making the wrong decision can lead to overthinking, procrastination, or avoidance. For instance, it's easy to tell a friend to take a risk, apply for a new job, start a business, or leave a toxic situation or relationship. But when it comes to our own lives, the uncertainty of failure and change holds us back. This fear often paralyzes us, preventing us from taking the very actions we encourage in others. From a psychological standpoint, our ability to handle others' problems better than our own is deeply tied to cognitive and emotional processes. Emotional reasoning plays a significant role in how we handle personal problems. When we face challenges, our emotions often dictate our perceptions, leading us to believe that our feelings are an accurate reflection of reality. For example, if we feel hopeless about a situation, we may assume there is no solution, even when logical alternatives exist. This emotional interference makes it difficult to apply the same level of objectivity that we use when analyzing other people's problems. I've experienced this firsthand. I can tell a friend exactly what they need to do, how to break free, how to start over, how to choose better. And yet, I remained stuck in my own cycle. I once struggled with addiction, and even as I advised others on how to escape their own battles, I was still trapped in my own struggle, unable to follow the very advice I gave. It's a cruel irony to see the way out so clearly for others while feeling lost in my own darkness. Stress disrupts our cognitive processes, making rational decision-making difficult. When we're overwhelmed, we fall into bad habits or avoid decisions altogether. But when helping others, we don't carry their stress, so we see things more logically. That's why their solutions seem obvious, while ours feel impossible. Our ability to solve problems for others is often influenced by our past experiences and the psychological distance we have from the situation. When advising others, we can draw from our knowledge, past mistakes, or successful resolutions without being hindered by emotional baggage. However, when we are in the midst of a personal crisis, we lack this level of detachment, making it harder to recognize viable solutions. Decision-making becomes particularly difficult when we are confronted with too many options, a phenomenon known as decision paralysis. When helping others, we simplify their choices by focusing on what seems most logical. However, when it comes to our own lives, we often overanalyze every possible consequence, leading to hesitation and inaction. Understanding this tendency can help us streamline our own decision-making process by focusing on key priorities rather than getting lost in unnecessary details. Ever notice how we can make smart, logical decisions for our friends, but struggle when it comes to our own? That's because our brain actually has two thinking systems. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman calls them System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, emotional, and instinct-driven. It's the gut feeling that makes us react instantly. System 2 is slow, rational, and analytical. It's the logical side we use when solving math problems or giving advice to others. When we help a friend, we use System 2. We're detached, logical, and objective. But when dealing with our own problems, System 1 hijacks the process. Emotions take over, and suddenly, what seems so simple for someone else feels impossibly complex. So how do we fix this? One trick is to step outside yourself, literally. Try asking, if a close friend were in my exact situation, what advice would I give them? This little mental shift forces your brain into System 2 mode, making it easier to see things clearly. Another psychological phenomenon at play is the observer effect. We think more rationally when viewing a situation as an outsider rather than from within. Studies in cognitive psychology have shown that self-distancing techniques, such as referring to oneself in the third person or imagining giving advice to another person, can help enhance decision-making clarity. For example, instead of asking, "What should I do in this situation?" try, "What would I tell my friend if they were in my situation?" This small shift in perspective can make a significant difference in rational problem solving. Emotional intelligence, EI, a concept popularized by Daniel Goleman, refers to our ability to understand and manage our own emotions, while also perceiving and influencing the emotions of others. High EI enables us to regulate emotional responses, making it easier to provide rational advice to others. However, when facing our own issues, we often struggle to detach emotions from decision-making, leading to hesitation and stress. Cognitive biases play a crucial role in why we struggle with our own problems. Some key biases include egocentric bias. We tend to see our own experiences as unique and more complicated than those of others, making it harder to take simple, rational advice. Loss aversion. The fear of losing something, a job, relationship, or status, makes us overestimate the risks of taking action, even when logic suggests otherwise. Status quo. Bias. We have a natural preference for things to remain the same, which leads to resistance to change, even when it is necessary for growth. Rumination. We dwell on our problems more than necessary, replaying negative scenarios in our minds, which increases anxiety and clouds rational judgment. Understanding these biases can help us recognize when they are affecting our decisions and consciously counteract them. A paradox of human nature is that even when we hit rock bottom, we are still capable of offering insightful advice to others. This is because our ability to analyze problems logically remains intact even when we ourselves are struggling. However, when we look inward, we are overwhelmed by emotions, self-doubt, and a sense of helplessness that prevents us from applying our own wisdom. Someone going through financial hardship may still be able to offer sound financial advice to a friend because they understand the mistakes that led to their current situation. Likewise, a person experiencing heartbreak may be the best at comforting others in similar pain, even if they cannot find solace for themselves. This contrast highlights how wisdom and insight do not disappear when we struggle. They are merely overshadowed by emotional distress when it comes to our own lives. This phenomenon suggests that our problems are often less about lacking knowledge and more about lacking the emotional detachment necessary to act on what we already know. Recognizing this tendency can be incredibly beneficial. If we handle other people's problems with greater clarity and objectivity, why not apply the same approach to our own? One powerful way to apply our own advice is through cognitive reframing, shifting our perspective on a situation to see it in a more constructive light. When we advise others, we often encourage them to focus on opportunities rather than obstacles. Applying the same mindset to our own problems can help us break free from negative thinking patterns and approach challenges with a growth-oriented perspective. Many of us struggle with personal decisions because we rely too much on emotions at the moment. Implementing a structured decision-making framework, such as listing pros and cons, considering worst-case scenarios, or using a step-by-step approach, can help us think more rationally. Just as we use logical reasoning when guiding others, we can use the same tools to make better choices for ourselves. Often, our inability to take our own advice is linked to emotional triggers, past experiences, fears, or insecurities that cloud our judgment. By identifying these triggers, we can learn to separate our emotions from our decisions. This self-awareness allows us to apply advice objectively, just as we would for a friend who isn't weighed down by our emotional baggage. While emotions are important, they should not dictate every decision we make. Learning to set boundaries between emotional responses and logical reasoning can help us approach our problems with greater clarity. Techniques such as mindfulness, journaling, or even taking time before making a decision can create the necessary space for rational thought. Sometimes we avoid following our own advice because we fear making the wrong choice. However, no decision is perfect, and mistakes are a natural part of growth. Just as we reassure others that failures are learning experiences, we must extend the same grace to ourselves. Accepting imperfection allows us to take action rather than remain stuck in indecision. Practical strategies to apply our own advice. Pretend you are advising a friend. When faced with a tough decision, ask yourself, what would I tell a close friend if they were in my shoes? Writing down the advice you would give can help distance yourself emotionally and gain clarity. Seek an outside perspective. Just as others benefit from our advice, we can benefit from an external perspective. Talking to a trusted friend, mentor, or even a therapist can help us see blind spots in our thinking. Practice self-detachment. Try viewing your life as if you were an observer. Journaling, meditation, or even role-playing as an outsider, analyzing your situation, can help create distance from emotions clouding your judgment. Consider the long-term impact. Many of our decisions are influenced by short-term emotions. By focusing on the long-term consequences of a choice, we can gain a more balanced perspective. Develop self-compassion. Often we are harder on ourselves than we are on others. Instead of harsh self-criticism, practice self-compassion and allow yourself the same patience and understanding that you extend to friends. Recognizing the gap between how we solve others' problems and how we handle our own is the first step toward real personal growth. It's natural. Our emotions, fears, and biases cloud our judgment. But here's the good news. We can overcome this. By practicing cognitive reframing, creating emotional distance, and seeking outside perspectives, we give ourselves the same clarity we so easily offer to others. But sometimes we need more than just logic. We need people. Having someone who checks in on us, who reminds us of our own wisdom when we forget, can make all the difference. A friend who says, "Hey, you tell me to do this, so why not take your own advice?" can be the push we need. At the end of the day, self-awareness and kindness, both from ourselves and from others, help us navigate life's toughest moments. So, Just as we guide and uplift those we care about, let's not forget to do the same for ourselves. Because the best advice we'll ever follow is the one we already know. We just need to be reminded sometimes.